Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are. This is just a quick update on what is happening regarding the Sadak election report on Zimbabwe's elections. As reported earlier, they are going to have an extraordinary Sadak summit on the 31st of October to discuss the Zimbabwe election results. That is now confirmed. The latest at the moment is that the SADC Secretariat, based in Botswana, have received the response from CCC and ZEC to the damning Sadak election observer mission report. They are now awaiting the response from ZANU PF, and they expect to receive it today. Apparently, the response from CCC was that the elections were flawed and illegal, and there should be fresh elections. And they want the fresh elections held in 3 or 6 months' time. That should be dismissed with contempt. What would have changed in 3 months' time? Yes, you can ask Sadak to supervise those elections. But what next? The next elections, are we going to call Sadak again to supervise the elections? This is a just meaningless cycle. Those elections, as we know, the 31st August elections, were blatantly rigged. There is something fundamentally wrong with our electoral process. And to just have somebody else supervise them without changing the fundamental problems, it's not going to change anything. We should deal with the problem. Let's deal with it. And to be quite honest, our friends in the opposition had the opportunity to deal with the problem, particularly during the GNU of 2008 to 2013, and they failed to implement even one meaningful democratic reform. As for ZEC's response, it's really immaterial. They failed to uphold, to deliver free, fair, and credible elections. That cannot be disputed. This is the most important conclusion by Sadak in the Sadak report, which I've got at the bottom of this screen there. What can ZEC say? So put up his hands and say, yeah, we failed to deliver free, fair, and credible elections according to Zimbabwe's own constitution, electoral law, and the whole electoral process violated the Sadak principle and guidelines on democratic elections. ZANU PF's response, well, we know that the regime and President Mnangagwa himself has been leading from the front, insisting that the elections were free, fair, and credible. And according to some reports in the social media, the regime is now involved with going around asking people to sign a petition to say the elections were free, fair, and credible. So I don't know whether they will be submitting it as part of their response. The whole box is full of petitions of people saying the elections were free, fair, and credible. but it should be dismissed with contempt. I view this whole exercise, being asked to have their say before the sentence is pronounced. And we expect Sadak to pronounce the sentence on the 31st of October. The election process was flawed and illegal. And I don't see how Sadak heads can avoid that. That is the reality. And it is not only the Sadak election observers who noted that. The AU election observer noted the same thing. To say nothing of the other European Union, Commonwealth, and so forth. And as far as I know, I haven't heard of anyone saying the elections were free, fair, and credible. So no doubt the Chinese had their election observers, but I think, as far as I know, they haven't dared to contradict the findings of Sadak or the AU for fear of being pointed as hypocrites. So no one, as far as I know, has ever said these elections were free, fair, and credible, other than ZANU PF itself insisting that they were free, fair, and credible. So I expect Sadak, heads of state, on the 31st of October to pronounce the judgment. And we expect the judgment to condemn the process as flawed and to get ZANU PF to accept that reality. As what will happen next, I think what should happen next is that Sadak should help Zimbabwe form a transition arrangement, the JNU, National Transition Authority, call it what you like, whose primary task will be to implement the democratic reforms so that this case of rigged elections is never repeated again. I think that is the number one task that they must carry out. In my view, neither ZANU PF nor CCC should be involved in that transition arrangement, for the simple reason that they were involved in the last GNU and they failed to implement even one meaningful democratic reform. And to keep bringing them back in, to me, is an exercise in futility. Why do we need to do that? It's absolutely ridiculous. It's going to take a lot of courage because, of course, ZANU PF, there's no intention of giving up power. I think somebody once said that ZANU PF would rather burn the whole country down than allow somebody else to rule it. And CCC, instead of making sure that ZANU PF does not burn the country down, I think CCC have taken the cautious arrangement that they will not confront ZANU PF in terms of reforms and making sure that elections are free, fair, and credible, and choose to wait until ZANU PF has burned the whole country down. And they can finally rule without ZANU PF being there. I think this is ridiculous. They failed to implement even one meaningful democratic reform in 23 years, and they've actually given up on reforms. They participated in these 2023 elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed. But as long as they got a few share of the seats, they're quite content with that, while they wait for ZANU PF to burn the whole country down. I think the people of Zimbabwe have got to make up their mind. They want the reforms carried out so that we can start rebuilding the country rather than see it completely destroyed. So as far as I'm concerned, the two parties have got their own agenda for doing nothing about reforms. We want the reforms implemented, and you cannot trust ZANU PF and CCC to implement those reforms. It's as simple as that. So the transition authority should not include those two parties, period. The other issue I wanted to bring, which is related to this issue, is this video that has been going the rounds. It's a recording of Mnangagwa speaking in Victoria Falls last week. Listen to this.
You had frightened me that I am meeting CEOs, meaning people who have succeeded in life and are at the top. But of course, without election. Which is good. Because in elections you rig. I doubt whether there's any rigging in the CEO. I think it's unmade. So I am talking to people who have to talk by merit. Further, I hope
what I find really disappointing is that here was Mnangagwa admitting that he has been rigging elections. And these chief executive officers are the cream of the cream of Zimbabwe society. They are the leaders in society. If anyone expected anyone to know the serious situation Zimbabwe is in, these are the people you would look to. They should know that Zimbabwe is a failed state because the country has been stuck with ZANU PF for the last 43 years. The people would have changed ZANU PF, but they could not because ZANU PF rigs the elections. And here is the man admitting it. It's even making it into a joke. How anyone could laugh at such a joke, such a sick joke, beggars belief. If these leaders of industry and society do not find the situation in Zimbabwe unacceptable, and particularly the rigging of elections totally unacceptable, how could you expect my grandfather or my uncle in the rural backwaters to do otherwise? I am absolutely flabbergasted. Every time I see this video, I can't believe that we have got leaders who can be so indifferent to the realities of the country's situation. I can't believe it. No wonder the country is in a mess. And no wonder the country is stuck. That is one of the biggest problems we have in Zimbabwe. But to come back to the situation I was talking about earlier on, Sadak leaders on the 31st of October will be saying to themselves, okay, the elections were rigged. The election observers have noted that. If we say ZANU PF is illegitimate, who are we going to put in their place? Who are we going to appoint in this interim arrangement that's supposed to take the country out of this mess? And if this is something to go by, if the leaders of Zimbabwe's industries, the chief executive officers from the various sectors of the Zimbabwe society are so naive that they don't even see the problem of rigged elections. Even now, 43 years after independence, in this day and age, who are we going to find to do this work for? I think most Sadak countries would be loath to find themselves in a situation where they declare the elections, yes, they were not free, fair, and credible. They confront ZANU PF and deny them legitimacy. Only 3 months later, to have the whole thing reenacted again, if we follow CCC's proposal that fresh elections should be held in 3 months' time. Even with Sadak's supervision. Let's face it, are we bringing in Sadak to do ZEC? Are we expecting Sadak to clean up a voters' roll in 3 months? Even if they manage to clean it up for 3 months. The police will still disrupt the opposition from holding their rallies. The ZANU PF operatives in the rural areas particularly will still be visiting the electorate by night to intimidate them. Are we going to get Sadak to send in police officers to arrest those operatives? The judges. We know that Zimbabwean judiciary is captured. Are we going to get Sadak to bring in judges too? This is becoming a nightmare. Among these CEOs who were cheering and applauding Mnangagwa when he admitted that he rigged the elections are judges. Some of them would have been heavily involved in this last election themselves. and no doubt would have been duly rewarded for their contribution, and that's why they are indifferent to the consequences. This is a nightmare. And I think Zimbabweans should not underestimate it. We have got a problem here. If those at the top of society are indifferent to what is happening, who is going to fix this problem? Sadak has done us a big favor. Sadak election observer teams have done us a big favor in picking up that this election process is flawed. Sadak heads of state would probably do us a big favor in saying, okay, let's have a new transition authority to implement the democratic reforms so that we get out of this mess. But they cannot have that interim government arrangement run by foreigners, Sadak officials, and not Zimbabweans. No Zimbabweans involved. Because at the present moment, to be quite honest, who is going to be the Zimbabwean we could trust to implement those reforms? We've already said CCC were involved in the last GNU. They failed to implement even one meaningful reform. And to be quite honest, bringing them back in is a waste of time. ZANU PF itself, they've got their own agenda. They don't want regime change. They're not going to reform themselves out of office. So if they were to be in that interim arrangement, it will be purely to make sure that no meaningful reforms are implemented. If we turn to some of our leaders in society, it doesn't get any higher than a chief executive officer of a big company, a five-star hotel, etc., etc. And yet here they are. Nangagwa is telling them that he rigged the elections and they think it is a joke. I have to admit it. I am absolutely disgusted. I can't believe. If Sadak leaders come the 31st of October, decide they're going to just give a slap on the wrist to ZANU PF and grant the regime legitimacy and allow the regime to carry on, I can't say I would blame them either. Given what I'm witnessing here, I think Zimbabwe is not ready for a healthy and functioning democracy. We seem to be content sinking slowly. And we are sinking. Zimbabwe is a failed state, and we are sinking. We can't even hold free, fair, and credible elections after 43 years of independence in this day and age. Jesus. I am disappointed, I'll be honest with you. Before I close, I just want to have a look at some of the comments of some of the listeners out there. I've got Charlie who is saying hi. Thank you very much. Hi to you, sir. Nyasha is also on the line, and he's saying, Mandigonira mkoma wangu. Danswa. Well, this is how Zimbabwe is all our country, and we really have got to do something about it. The situation, if we can't improve it, who is going to improve it? And Tawanda says, hashtag free Zimbabwe. Yeah, it's easier said than done. We had our independence in 1980. And I think it is no exaggeration that we got from the frying pan into the fire. Or because of failing to govern ourselves, of course. And Marvel says, Marvel, sorry, Matadi, says free Zimbabwe. Yeah, free Zimbabwe indeed. I don't know whether you're saying we are free Zimbabwe now or we need to free ourselves after we freed ourselves from white colonial rule. And I got a comment here, Zimbabwe is not ruled by elections. And as long as sanctions are running against economic growth, ZANU PF will remain in force, supported by Jaminu Kambuyane and Sekuruka Govi, etc., etc. I think this is becoming rhetorical. The sanctions were introduced in 2001, for instance. And ZANU PF has been rigging elections since 1980. So to blame, to justify rigging elections on the basis that there are sanctions is, to me, just a feeble excuse. And in any case, even if there are sanctions, what has got my aunt and uncle in the rural areas who are being frog marched to attend ZANU PF rallies and to vote for ZANU PF, what have they got to do with sanctions? We can't keep on blaming others. I think it is becoming a habit in Zimbabwe. ZANU PF blaming sanctions and Triple C blaming ZANU PF. It's becoming a circus. Both parties would never acknowledge doing anything wrong. Yet in some cases, you find with most of these problems is their own making. The economy is in shambles not because of sanctions, but because of gross mismanagement and corruption. And we have not been able to replace the corrupt and incompetent regime because ZANU PF rigs elections. That is a historic fact. And Sadak has just revealed that ZANU PF has been rigging elections. Are you going to blame the rigging on sanctions as well? Let's have a look at another comment. Christopher says, yeah, that's a full evidence to Sadak on that video clip on ED's speech. Well, I think in this particular case, they already have even more solid evidence rather than hearsay that the elections were rigged. But I agree. I think, to be quite honest, we've got a regime now that is not even ashamed that they are rigging elections. Just as much as Mnangagwa is not ashamed that there is looting in Zimbabwe. And that's why you find he wasn't even shocked to hear of Mbafa for ED That is where we are as a country. And I think ordinary people, ordinary Zimbabweans accepting that sort of situation as well, to me, is unforgivable. We are the ones who should be saying this is totally unacceptable, and yet we are not doing so. Another comment here from Lloyd. Nkoma Simba Zanu. I can't read that, it's so small. I'm not sure what you wanted to say there. Yeah, but this is Wilbert actually, Mokori. This is not Simba, although it is being beamed on Zimai as well. Chamnorwa says, if CCC boycotted these elections, we wouldn't have got to this to expose these elections. I think that argument is a fallacious argument. In other words, it's going round and round in circles. The issue of CCC, they were elected, and Zimbabweans have risked life and limb all these last 23 years. The primary purpose of MDC was to implement the democratic changes to stop ZANU PF rigging the elections. They had the golden opportunity to do so during the GNU. They failed to implement even one meaningful reform. Are we saying then that they did us a favor because that allowed ZANU PF to continue rigging the elections so that ZEC and Sadak had something to uncover now? That's a vicious circle. We wanted the reforms implemented to stop ZANU PF rigging the elections. And to keep on arguing that somehow it is to our benefit is a ridiculous argument. It is not. The truth of the matter is they failed to implement even one meaningful reform during the GNU because Mugabe bribed them and they were busy enjoying themselves during the GNU. They forgot about reforms. And they've been participating in these flawed elections because they also know that ZANU PF is giving away a few gravy train seats to entice the opposition to participate. And if you don't believe me, maybe you should believe people like David Coulthard, who have admitted this in his own book. Participating in these flawed elections has been out of greed. That is a historic fact that I think some of the people in the opposition do not want to accept. But it is, whether you care to accept it or not, it's irrelevant. The point is, it is a historic fact. I've got another comment here. While it's free Zimbabwe again, is Zazisai Isaac is the criminals are ZANU and ZEC and not CCC, as you said. Well, I will still stand by my word. If CCC failed to implement even one meaningful democratic change when the golden opportunity to do so during the GNU, I can't say how I can't see how anyone can say they are not conniving in this process. Particularly more so when you're thinking of what is the way forward. The way forward is that we want a national transition authority. And in that national transition authority, we want men and women who will implement the reforms. If you're going to get CCC in that national transition authority, to me, you're only repeating the same mistake. Because if they failed to implement reforms before, what makes you think they'll do so now? Failure to accept that CCC sold out during the GNU is one of the biggest problems that we have as a country. Because it clearly shows that we have learned nothing from the past. And therefore, then if you have not learned anything from the past, they're likely to repeat the same mistake. That is the argument. I've got another one saying free Zimbabwe as well. Junior here. And Love More saying hashtag free Zimbabwe, our last hope is Sadak. I totally agree with you. Although in this particular case, if I was Sadak, I must admit I am dreading the prospect of refusing to grant ZANU PF legitimacy, because I know then you've thrown yourself a gauntlet, a challenge, a serious challenge on who the heck are you going to work with in Zimbabwe. Because at the present moment, to be quite honest, I'm at a total loss as who the country can put forward as people who can implement these reforms. Another comment there, Lucky saying free Zimbabwe. Beck, I'm with you there, Wilbert. I was severely disappointed when I heard people laughing when a notorious electoral fraudulent thief was boasting about having rigged the elections. What is wrong? I totally agree with that. I couldn't believe it myself. I think it really speaks volumes of Zimbabwean society itself. If these are the creme de la creme of society, and they're so shallow, thick, and slow, they don't realize the serious problem we are in ZANU PF has caused after all these years of rigged elections. You know, you really have got to say to yourself, so who is going to solve this problem then? Yeah. According to Mnangagwa himself, these are the individuals who got in at the top by merit. Well, I can't say they've got anything that will justify me believe they've got any merit in terms of political intellect. It really is disappointing, Beck. I totally agree with that. Chinyani says Zimbabwe is a sovereign state who is a member of Sadak. Yes, but sovereignty has got to be derived from the people. Legitimacy has got to be derived from the people through free, fair, and credible elections. And if the elections were not free, fair, and credible, we do not have a legitimate government. It is as simple as that. And Sadak are stepping in to sort this out because we have failed to sort it out ourselves. And I think now that Sadak is heavily involved, we should appreciate their help and cooperate. And one of the ways we can cooperate is to make sure that we support Sadak stand on denying ZANU PF legitimacy, and also stand with Sadak in demanding that ZANU PF cannot be part of the solution because they are the problem. The same applies to CCC. They are the problem, and therefore then they cannot be the solution. And I think that message, we should be the ones saying it and not have to wait for Sadak to say it for us. If Sadak was to appoint ZANU PF and CCC, we should be the ones to say, no, we can't have the repeat of the same problem. It's us who, at the end of the day, will have to live with this problem. This is our second chance, second bite at the cherry to solve this problem of rigged elections. Let's make sure we solve it. Another comment here from Felix. I really think Chamisa is also a criminal in a way or another. He promised that rigging is not going to happen, not anymore. To our surprise, that plan is to just keep quiet. If no plan to give people signal, then we know what to do now. Or next time we are faced, I think you meant, with this challenge. Well, I agree on the issue of Chamisa promise that the elections, he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. I think that was just hot air. And I think the real shame is that many Zimbabweans out there were naive enough to believe it. And I think this is one of the fundamental problems we've had in our society. We have had a very naive and gullible electorate. And that is not going to augur well with building a healthy and functioning democracy. And it is also equally tragic, in fact, that even after the elections, after when it was clear that Chamisa had lied about I've plugged all the holes, many Zimbabweans out there still have not taken him to task on that point. They're still willing to hold him and worship him as if he's a demigod who can do nothing wrong. That is a fundamental weakness in our society. Democracy demands an electorate that is well-informed and very diligent, and is willing to stand up and hold those in positions of power and authority to account, not an electorate that is willing to accept whatever is dished out to them. I think it is a serious problem, and if we think we can get away with it, well, we are being very naive. There is another comment from Wellington. Thank you, Sadak. I totally agree with you there. You are our hope to run free, fair, and credible elections. ZANU PF have captured all systems. That's equally true. ZANU PF knows that no one likes them. I think you meant. We are tired of lies. We are Zimbabweans. We are no longer interested in ZANU PF. Well, as long as ZANU PF is able to rig elections, they will stay in power until the donkeys grow horns, as some of the ZANU PF cronies have been posting. The video that I just played there, Mnangagwa is admitting he is at the top. He has got the top job in the country, not just a company, in the country. And he himself admits that he has managed to hang on to it because he rigs the elections. And if we can't solve this problem, he will stay in power. I think so far we have failed to solve that problem. And I think we should take it more seriously than we have done so far. And so far, we've not shown any great initiative. Another comment from Dustin. ZANU PF is not Zimbabwe. It belongs to all Zimbabweans. Therefore, enough is enough. ZANU PF must go. Well, the slogan ZANU PF must go is not enough. It's not going to remove ZANU PF. As long as they can rig the elections, they'll stay in. The challenge really is to stop ZANU PF rigging the elections. And at the present moment, we had the opportunity to do so during the 2008 to 2013 GNU, and we failed to implement even one meaningful democratic reform to stop the rigging. Sadak is giving us another bite of the cherry, and we must make it count. And one of the ways to make sure that we get it right this time is making sure that we have got people lined up who are competent, who are committed to implementing those democratic reforms. And that we Zimbabweans, we should refuse to be weighed down by ZANU PF, because I can tell you ZANU PF is not going to give up easily. They would want, even if they're told that the elections were rigged, you are illegitimate, they would want to be involved in the GNU or the National Transition Authority, whatever it is. And once they are there, their purpose is to make sure that no reforms are implemented. They will be fighting, and ZANU PF does not fight clean, as we all know. So this fight is only just beginning. But I think we Zimbabweans should be ready and not accept to be compromised. ZANU PF has held the nation to ransom for 43 years. We can stop them now. Here is another comment from Trust. Thank you, my brother. We need our Zimbabwe free. We need independence, not an artificial one. I totally agree with you. If we keep rigging elections, this is not the independence that we talked about. Every Zimbabwean should have a meaningful say in the governance of the country. I think that is at the very heart of good governance. And we have not had good governance. That's why we are in this mess. And the only way to make sure we restore that is making sure we implement all the democratic reforms. And this time we must get it right. Another comment from Jamnorwa. MDC is dead and over. CCC have learned from that mistake and they are correcting it. Well, I beg to differ with you there. I think we should not fall into this trap of politicians changing their name and pretending that they had nothing to do with the past. This is no different from Mnangagwa with his Second Republic. It's totally meaningless. Mnangagwa was one of the key people during Mugabe's 37 years. And now to pretend as if he had nothing to do with that is absolutely ridiculous. And the same applies with CCC. CCC was just MDC alliance dusted up and given a new name, new regalia. And some of the officials in CCC are the same officials who were in MDC alliance. And so to keep on pretending as if CCC is a completely new baby, nothing to do with the past, is, to say the least, naive. But what is more telling is that MDC, as I've pointed out, failed to implement the democratic reforms during the GNU. They participated in 2013 out of greed. They participated as MDC Alliance in 2018 out of greed. They participated in these elections out of greed. And even when Sadak had said those elections were flawed, they still accepted their gravy train seats. So to keep on saying they've changed, what has changed there? They are doing exactly the same thing that they were doing before. You know, I think we should not fall into that easy trap of being told, "Oh, I've changed." A snake that has just shed off its old coat, a cobra that has just shed out its old coat, is still a cobra. You know, and we should not be deceived by saying Guru or Acho and think, well, no, it is a different snake. It is not. I think that is important. Chirandu Gono says, we can't live in the past. Blaming MDC today when we have CCC doesn't take us anywhere. It's not blaming CCC, it's stating facts. They participated in these 2023 elections, knowing fully well that there was not even a verified voters roll, something that Sadak election observers have picked up. What is the excuse for that? No one is blaming them. We're just pointing out the facts. They should account for it. Earlier on, one of the earlier comments there was talking of Chamisa making promises, and indeed he did. He said he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes, and yet now we find we've got the voters roll that has got so many flaws in it. It's unbelievable. We need to deal with facts as they stand. Problem with our culture is that we always seem to think once you have decided you support party A, you want to elevate them to the position where they cannot do nothing wrong, which is, I think, a very unfortunate position, because you need to have an open mind. Even if you are an active member, if anything at all, in fact, if you are an active member of a party, you should hold the party to account, because that is the quickest way of making sure the party becomes competent and efficient. And somehow sweeping their problems under the carpet doesn't help anybody. It's a vicious circle. Another comment here from Guru. He says, citizens no longer want ZANU PF and all over the world. I think most people would agree that if elections were free, fair, and credible, ZANU PF would have been removed from office a long, long time ago. The fact that ZANU PF has been rigging these elections is the serious number one problem. And therefore, then for the opposition, the serious and number one problem that they should have sorted out is stopping ZANU PF rigging the elections. And this is where you have got to hold the opposition to account. Why have they failed to implement even one meaningful reform to stop ZANU PF rigging the elections? Louis says Chamisa is a spy. Well, I don't know about that. I think that is an issue that I cannot comment on. Mbabo says, I feel let's give encouragement ideas, not just blaming without alternatives. Well, it's not blaming. I think people have got to snap out of this idea that when somebody is being held to account, you're blaming them. They should account for their failures. If they've got justification for it, they should say it. And I think the electorate should not jump to the defense of the leaders. Let the leaders themselves account for what they've done. That is part and parcel of a healthy democracy. In fact, everybody has got a duty to hold those in public office to account. It's not a luxury, it's a duty. And we should take it very seriously. And I think it is most unfortunate that some of our people have got the mentality that if you belong to a party, your allegiance to the party is such that you don't hold them to account. You don't question what the leaders do. This is the kind of mentality that I think George Orwell was trying to portray in his book Animal Farm. Where characters like Boxer the horse believed that Napoleon is always right. When you have that mentality, of course, if the leader is always right, you never hold them to account. And this mentality of Chamisa Chete Chete, I think, is one of the contributory factors why we are in this mess. We talked about earlier on there why people participated in an electoral process that was so flawed, we didn't even have a verified voters roll. But when Chamisa said he has plugged all the holes, what else can you say? You accept it. You believe it. I think we've got to snap out of it. Chamnurwa comes back and says, yes, been properly advised to go into elections and expose them. Well, we should not deceive ourselves and say his participation exposed the vote rigging. The vote rigging was already there because no reforms were implemented. That is a fact. The same vote rigging happened in 2018, and Sadak officials then turned a blind eye to it and endorsed those elections. The same applies to 2013. And CCC were participating in these flawed elections with the same view. So the fact that we happen to be lucky this time that we had a new Sadak election observer team who looked at the problem and openly and unflinchingly pointed out the flaws in the process is to the credit of those officials, not to the credit of CCC. I think we really need to snap out of this idea of thinking that CCC did us a favor, MDC did us a favor by not implementing reforms. Sadak is in it. Well, Sadak at the present moment is our only hope, and I think we owe them a big thank you. Lamek says, why people are blaming Chamisa, yet everyone knows how ZANU is. Those are the people who are giving ZANU PF power. Well, I think nobody is blaming Chamisa that ZANU PF rigged elections. But people are saying Chamisa and his friends are accountable for failing to implement reforms to stop ZANU PF rigging the elections. That is a different argument. And I think you need to accept that the opposition have got for the last 23 years have had many opportunities to implement reforms to stop ZANU PF rigging the elections. And we have got to deal with those failures. And we can't pretend that they didn't happen. They happened, and I think it is important that we acknowledge that. And I think it goes back to the same argument I was saying here, that we seem to believe that holding public office, those who hold public office to account, only applies to the officials in the other party, not my party. No, it applies to officials in your party as much as to the other party. The opposition have a role to play in any democratic society. In this particular case, the number one task that the opposition was given since 1999, when they were launched, was to implement the democratic reforms, the democratic changes, as implied in the party name, Movement for Democratic Change. After 23 years, it is absolutely logical to ask them, what democratic changes have you brought? And to say, to fail to do so is to fail in your duty to hold those in public office to account. So I think we really need to snap out of this. I think as a people, it has undermined our own effectiveness as in our efforts to build a democratic nation. I've got comments here from Tina. I feel that is people in the diaspora also letting us down. I say this because they are able to make their voices heard without being persecuted. They are not supporting those back home with full force. Well, I think those in the diaspora could do a lot better. Personally, I think also, particularly in holding the opposition to account, the kind of blind loyalty that I've seen from some of the people in the diaspora is disappointing, to say the least. These are the people who should be better informed and who should be able to, even if you don't say it publicly, but at least say it privately, that the opposition has been ineffective. And yet some of them are the ones cheering from the front. It's not doing the country any favors at all. Particularly when you think that those in the diaspora, because you're exposed to some of the information, you know what a free, fair, and credible election should be like. You'll be the ones who'll be telling the people back home where the opposition is doing the wrong thing. Instead, they're the ones who are busy sweeping all these problems under the carpet and misleading people. It's most unfortunate. But having said that, I would also want to emphasize that I salute a lot of people in the diaspora. I think for most of them, they could have easily decided, I'm in the diaspora, I'm out of the madhouse, and I've got nothing to do with it. And I salute those who have taken a very active interest in what is happening in Zimbabwe. Some of them, they may not be active politically, but they have also helped in financing and helping financially the people back in Zimbabwe. There is no denying that the diaspora dollar has kept Zimbabwe afloat, or at least helped save a lot of lives in Zimbabwe. So I salute that. And also would strongly encourage those in the diaspora to still remain politically active. Some of them, yes, they've been discouraged by some of the overzealous opposition supporters in particular, who think that anyone who has left the country has betrayed the country, and what is more, that they don't know anything. I think that is a very narrow view, to say the least, because no one out there has got monopoly to knowledge, and no one out there has got the monopoly to solutions to Zimbabwe's problems. And I think that is a message that should be sent out. If you have remained active, you are in the diaspora, you have remained active, that clearly shows that you care about that country. Some of those people in the diaspora may not be thinking of ever going back to Zimbabwe, but still they care that the country should not be in this mess, that the country can recover. That is to be encouraged. And so I would strongly recommend that people remain active. Tina, you followed up with, if Mnangagwa admitted to rigging, what have the diasporians done? Have they gone to the embassies and campaigned and complained? Well, I think in this particular case, the fact that Zimbabweans have not really highlighted this problem. I mean, I'm disappointed by that video. I can't deny that. And I think many Zimbabweans circulating it and maybe commenting on it and condemning it could also help. As for the embassies, say in the West, the West has been saying all along that Zimbabwe has been, ZANU PF has been rigging the elections. And I think it is Zimbabweans themselves who have not played our part in condemning that. I think we could have been even more active than we have. But at the present moment, personally, I think we should focus on what Sadak is doing and support it in all possible ways we can, in the social media and on the public forums and so forth. This is the time when we could really raise our voice and make sure that we articulate what solution we want. I think it's not good enough to wait until we hear what Sadak has decided. We should also be articulating what solution we want to see happen in Zimbabwe. What is the way forward? And I think that is one role that people in the diaspora could play. I've got another long comment here from Manuel. ZANU PF and CCC are all the same. Well, I totally agree with you there. I think they are partners in this mess that we are in. They definitely were both in the GNU. They both failed to implement even one meaningful reform, and to think that they can still play a meaningful role the way forward is ridiculous. Sadak is giving us a second bite of the cherry, and I honestly think we should make the most of it. Sorry, I've got to try to rush and get to as many comments as possible. Vincent says, Felix Chuona, okay. Okay, I think he's replying to somebody else. Saka. Okay, I'm not sure what you're trying to say there. Sorry, my computer, also my screen is really tiny. I should maybe work on how to expand this so I can see it much better. There is another comment from Mawayo. They not participated. What was going to happen? Well, if you're going to go to that one, you've got to go back to 2000 and to the GNU. If they had implemented the reforms, what would have happened? Of course, we would have had free, fair, and credible elections. So to say they did not implement the reforms so that they could allow Sadak to see the same vote rigging, it's a ridiculous argument. I honestly think it's a vicious cycle. So are we saying here, for instance, that now Sadak has given us another chance of another GNU, CCC should not implement reforms again, so that next time Sadak election observers have got something to report on? So this cycle will never stop. We're not supposed to be in the business of rigged elections and complaining to Sadak. The purpose of the opposition when they were voted in 1999, when they were launched, was to implement the democratic changes necessary to stop ZANU PF rigging the elections. They were riding on a wave of public support and demand for democratic change. They called themselves a movement for democratic change, to take advantage of that. And now, 23 years later, you have got to ask them, what democratic changes have you delivered? And to find that they've not delivered even one, it's ridiculous. I think that point is something that I think most people fail to understand and grasp, and I think they should look at it again. Bambo, you come back again and said, you have pointed out the failures day in and day out. Let's talk something progressive in view of the situation at hand. Well, I believe that is progressive, because in this particular case, if we're not going to repeat the same mistake, we have got to accept those failures. And I think many people out there have not accepted those failures. And I think some of the people who acknowledge that they were failures, they are very quick because they want to sweep them under the carpet. If CCC, for instance, have accepted their failures, why then are they the ones submitting in their solution, as their solution way forward, that we should have re-elections in 3 or 6 months' time? What would have happened in 3 months or 6 months' time? Nothing. They fail to appreciate that we are in this mess because we failed to implement reforms. And now they want us to go into fresh elections without any reforms. So that point you're making, that we want something progressive. This is what I'm saying to you. These people have not learned anything. And if you think that is making progress, that is not making progress. That's just kicking the can down the road. After 43 years of rigged elections, we must solve this problem. That is my argument. Samnorwa says Monzora boycotted. What's your say on him? I think Monzora he is not a major player in this. And to try to bring him in and elevate him to the point as if he's a major player who is going to change our destiny is to make the mistake. We have got other bigger issues to focus on. Monzora is small fish to me. He failed to implement reforms when he had the golden opportunity, as did the rest of the other MDC leaders. Lamek says, I want to understand something. Why did we go to elections without voters' roll? Well, Lamek, you've got to say to yourself, this is something that is at the very heart of the GNU of 2008 to 2013. The democratic reforms that were supposed to be implemented were supposed to fix all those problems so that we've got free, fair, and credible elections. None of those reforms were implemented. Why? You could ask. And when they realized that they'd not implemented the reforms, why is the opposition continued to participate in these flawed elections without reforms? The answer is still the same. The same reason they failed to implement reforms during the GNU is the same reason they've been participating in flawed elections. Greed. That is, before I finish this, I will show you an extract from David Coulter's book. Let me just go through the comments. I don't know whether, I think we're probably getting to the bottom of them now. Got Lamek there. Remember to take out ZANU PF out of power. It is not one day, Chamisa is on the right way. I don't know about that one. After 23 years, the opposition has failed to implement even one meaningful reform. We can't keep on pretending that he is on the right track. Isaac says, we've had enough of blaming the victims. I don't know which victims they're talking about. It's Zimbabweans who are the victims here, and all that is needed is to hold ZANU PF to account for the breach of the constitution and abuse of the power. Well, the opposition were in the GNU and they had the opportunity to implement reforms. And to say they failed to do so, calling that blaming them, misses the point completely. That is holding them to account. And particularly when they keep repeating the same mistake. We have got to snap out of this mentality of thinking that the only people who can be held to account are the parties from the leaders from another party, not my party. Everyone who holds public office is democratically accountable to the public. That is at the basis of a healthy and functioning democracy. And sweeping mistakes by your own party under the carpet is not helping the country at all. And it definitely is not making our democratic processes healthier. I think we've had a look at this one. Let's have a look at this one. Junior have not said anything there. Wellington. Okay. Those chief executive officers in Mnangagwa, impavadzese adzinabasa nokuti povo iri kuhei. I think that could well explain some of the situations there. In Zimbabwe, it cannot be denied that most people who are doing well are not doing well out of merit, actually. They're doing well because they've got the right political connections. This is why it is so difficult to do business in Zimbabwe. And some of them maybe were cheering because they fear that if they they fail to cheer, they could be singled out. That is another problem in Zimbabwe, where people are doing something to protect their own selfish interests, even at the expense of the overall national good. So I think that those points cannot be denied. Gabriel says, presidential stance. Well, this is somebody who's advertising. Jessica says, please, we're tired of ZANU PF must go. Well, as much as we are tired, as long as they still remain, if Sadak grants them political legitimacy, then we are stuck with them for the next 5 years. And I must admit, the prospect of that is makes me sick in the stomach. Let's put it that way. Moyo says, I blame the chief executive officers who laughed when he said that. Well, I think we should really seriously take them to task on that one. This kind of thing is totally unacceptable, particularly from those who are supposed to be cream de la cream of society. We can't all be selfish. That's just because they are making it doesn't mean they should be oblivious of the political situation back at home. Lamek, you're saying the mistake was going to elections without voters' roll. No one is accountable about how many people registered. Chamisa was to stop there until voters' roll was transparent and to all citizens. I totally agree. I think the election process itself in Zimbabwe, particularly if we look at the opposition, they have played their part in allowing ZANU PF to rig elections and get away with it, particularly during the GNU when they should have implemented the democratic reforms. That cannot be denied. Jacob is talking about job scholar. I think that one is without saying whether we belong to another party. No one should be subjected to what job scholar is being subjected to. I think that point must be made very clear. We want a democratic Zimbabwe where there is rule of law. If you commit a crime, you should be arrested, brought before the courts of law, and have due process. That is part and parcel of a healthy and functioning democratic state. What is happening with Job Scholar is an outrage. He has not been convicted, and it's now over a year. You know, it only emphasizes what kind of regime we have in ZANU PF. These are thugs through and through. They want to make an example of Job Scholar, to scare everybody into silent submission to their tyrannical rule. That is what we are saying here. And I think every Zimbabwean should condemn that kind of thuggery. Susanna says ZANU PF must go out. Yeah, but well, I think everybody will agree with you, but getting it done is not going to be, is the challenge. At the present moment, like I said, Sadak have done us a big favor. And if we make the most of this favor, we could get out of this. This is our get out of jail card, as far as I'm concerned, what Sadak is doing. But we need to show them that we now know what we want in Zimbabwe, and we're willing to fight for it. Just one more comment from Grace. As much as people may blame the opposition, but the situation on the ground is different. ZANU PF will continue amending laws left, right, and center. Well, if you participate in a flawed process and give ZANU PF legitimacy, then the consequences are, as a legitimate government, they will continue to rule tyrannically. I think at this point, I'll stop there and show you the comment that I was talking about from David Coulthard. This is David Coulthard in his book, which I don't know whether some of you have had a chance to read, but it is worthwhile reading. In that book, David Coulthard, this is he is writing about the election soon after the 2013 elections. The 2013 election process was so flawed, so illegal, that the only logical step was to withdraw, which would have compelled Sadak to hold ZANU PF to account. But such was the distrust between MDCT and MDCN that neither could withdraw for fear that the other would remain in the election, winning seats and giving the process credibility. In other words, they participated in those elections because they knew that ZANU PF was giving away a few seats and they wanted those seats. They participated out of greed. They knew that by participating, you are giving the process credibility. And yet they still participated. I think the likes of David Coulthard tried to talk his MDC friends into accepting, remember, this is after 2013 election, to make sure that next time they would not participate. And in fact, the full quotation of that one is that they participated because they failed to come up with a coalition. That was 2013. 2018, they had come up with a coalition, the MDC Alliance. But even then, there was no talk of boycotting the elections because they were also still after the few gravy train seats that they knew ZANU PF was offering. David Coulthard was not the only one, by the way, who acknowledged the sheer futility of participating in these elections. Tendai Biti said the same thing, and this is Tendai Biti in an interview he gave in 2015, saying exactly the same thing and trying to also persuade some of his fellow opposition members that we should not continue participating in these flawed elections. That is the problem. When they failed to persuade their fellow opposition members not to participate, they turned around and participated themselves. Tendai Biti was desperate to be in the 2023 elections. We know he tried to hang on to his party as to represent the CCC in the elections as a member of parliament, and he failed. David Coulthard, he was senator last time. Before that, he was a member of parliament. This time, he participated, but decided he was going to be a councillor and then mayor of the city of Bulawayo. And he is now the mayor of the city of Bulawayo. So he participated in the process, knowing fully well that this process is flawed. But he knew there is an opportunity for him to become mayor and have a gravy transit. We cannot keep on sweeping that under the carpet. This is the reality. The opposition's participation in elections in Zimbabwe is not a secret. Mnangagwa, in fact, after 2018, has enhanced to entice more people to keep on participating by creating Pollard. Pollard serves no other purpose other than to reward those who lost in the presidential race. The most crucial thing that they had to do to get into Pollard was for them to publicly admit that the elections were free, fair, and credible, and Mnangagwa is legitimate. In 2023, Mnangagwa knew that Pollard was going to attract a lot of interest. Many people would want to be in Pollard, who would refuse a 60,000 vehicle, a diplomatic passport, and many other frisbees that come with Pollard. But to limit the number of participants in the presidential election, he introduced the rule that you've got to pay the US 20,000 nomination fee. Of course, many people could not afford that. And so we ended up with only 11. I believe you. I believe that if there had not been such a steep nomination fees, we would have seen a whole lot more presidential candidates in 2023 than we even saw in 2018. 2018 were 23 of them. This time, I wouldn't have been surprised at all if we had 80 of them. All after the Pollard, or most of them would be after the Pollard. In this recent race, Mnangagwa got 52.6% of the vote, according to ZEC. Chamisa got 44% of the vote. The remaining 9 candidates had between them the 3.4% of the vote. And if the dust had settled down right now, I can tell you now that a number of them would have publicly pronounced the election free, fair, and credible, and would have been in Pollard. And they'll be driving their twin cabs. And unlike you and me, traveling around with their diplomatic passports at taxpayers' expense. Yes, Chamisa and his friends would have been content with the gravy train seats that they get by winning in parliamentary seats and council elections. We should never underestimate, or rather deny the fact that corruption and mismanagement and incompetence were the root causes why the opposition failed to implement even one meaningful reform. That is a fact. I would like to close by going back to the topic of discussion today, and it is that Sadak Secretariat in Botswana have received ZEC and ZEC's response to the damning Sadak Election Observer Mission report on Zimbabwe's 23rd August election. ZANU PF is expected to submit their, their response by the end of the day today. I view this as nothing more than criminals who, after the court proceedings are all completed, are being given the chance to have their say before the judge pronounces sentencing. That is how I view it. These three bodies connived in failing the people of Zimbabwe to deliver free, fair, and credible elections. And I hope Sadak leaders will tell these three in no uncertain terms that election was flawed and illegal, and therefore then failed to produce a legitimate government. And therefore then the ZANU PF and ZEC members of parliament, senators, etc., they are all illegitimate. And Zimbabwe has got to now come up with a way forward. How are we going to get out of this situation? We need an interim arrangement whose primary purpose will be to implement the democratic reforms to make sure that Zimbabwe will finally have free, fair, and credible elections that will produce legitimate governments. That will be their number one task. So they've got to implement the reforms and then hold free, fair, and credible elections. I would argue that neither ZANU PF, nor ZEC, nor ZEC officials as they are presently constituted should in any way be involved in the National Transition Authority, because they will only be there to disrupt the work of that body. We need to implement these reforms. Zimbabwe cannot afford to have another rigged election. That is my main message to you. And I think the next 2 weeks will be dramatic in the sense that we as Zimbabweans, we need to articulate what we want to see happen. We should not wait for Sadak, heads of state, the judges to pronounce their judgment. We should also be saying what is it we want. That is even more important in terms of showing that we support Sadak, what they've done, we appreciate what they have done, and we also appreciate Sadak's efforts, because I think Sadak, it is in their interest also to make sure that Zimbabwe gets out of this mess. And I think given the opportunity, they would definitely want to see a competent National Transition Authority that will implement the reforms. We have got to show Sadak that we appreciate what that takes, and that is exactly what we also want. With that, I would say thank you very much for listening, and let's meet again and discuss this issue, because I think this is probably the game changer. If Sadak, which they have done, upheld the Sadak report, and now going to make their decision, this is what will change Zimbabwe. if we play our cards right, if we manage to get the reforms implemented, and we, the people of Zimbabwe, must see to it that that is done. With that, I really would have to say thank you very much again for listening and for your patience, and have a good day.